Welcome to the channel. The latest patch note has just been released, and judging by the excitement it's causing, it's going to bring some big changes to some classes. It looks like we've entered a phase of major rebalancing of all characters. So I encourage you to review all the upcoming changes.
May you be met with roaring cheer, adventurer. Since our last content update, souls have been ruptured with the Season 17 Battle Pass. Players have donned the Walking Nightmare cosmetic set, and fresh blood was spilt with the return of the Conqueror limited time event. This update brings whispers of fables coming soon, with the Founding Discord limited time event, updates to the Trial of the Hordes PvP mode, class-wide changes, and a variety of updates. While creeping through the underbelly of the keep, you slink past a mage's study and notice a warm glow emanating from beneath the door. The worn frame creaks open. Surrounded by many trinkets and potions lies a singular orb swirling in mystery. You pause and gaze deeply, surprised to catch a faint glimmer of unknown events. From September 14th, September 25th, adventurers over level 30 will get a preview of deeds soon to unfold in Sanctuary. During the event, you will also receive a 100% boost to experience gained from Battle Pass levels. Trial of the Hordes Unleashed. Experienced you may be, but emerging victorious from the Trial of the Hordes is the true mark of a champion. From September 6th to September 20th, go head-to-head against another player while earning rewards and climbing your way through the event's ranks. Each player has an enclosed lane, which broods of demons will flood in waves. Your goal is to cull the demons from hell, with steadfast dedication, for the devastating return of Trial of the Hordes. We are introducing several changes to this brutish contest. Matchmaking changes. You can no longer identify your opponent. When matched, you can now requeue after a match without the need to return to a safe zone or Westmark. Gameplay changes. Similar to the first Trial of the Hordes limited time event, as you slay demons, more enemies will spawn on your opponent's side and vice versa. Wing conditions have been updated to narrow your focus on the battlefield and sharpen your gaze to the competing threats before you. If both players are still alive at the match end, the player who has slain the most non-elite monsters wins. If both players tie for kills, the player who took the least amount of damage wins. If there is a T-breaker on both conditions, the player that killed their monsters first is declared the victor. Monster kills and damage taken are indicated near your health bar at the top of your screen to show which adventurer is currently in the lead. Damage, attack speed, and movement speed for monsters has been increased overall. These attributes scale the longer a monster remains alive. Developer says, "We wanted gameplay to feel more chaotic, fast-paced, and like the adrenaline-filled last few moments of a match during the first Trial of the Hordes." These gameplay changes were made to increase the pace of combat and make for a more lethal experience. Our goal of increasing lethality should also result in less matches ending in a T-breaker. Task changes. Tasks will now reset on a weekly basis at 3 AM server time each Wednesday during the event. Your journey in Trial of the Hordes is marked by the rank system. As you win matches and increase your rank, you'll not only earn rewards and enter new rank tiers, but steadily climb your way up the leaderboard as well. Here are some additional guidelines for Trial of the Hordes. Players will compete against other players of the same class time. To showcase your prowess, matchmaking for Trial of the Hordes is cross-server. We hope you're ready for fiercer competition. Slain monsters can drop combat globes. Use these to turn the tides of battle. Slicing through cabals of wicked demons will spawn vigorous elite enemies on your opponent's side. All gear, legendary gems, badges, and other bonuses can be used. Ranking changes. The points system is now updated, so that you earn points for participating in a match with additional points for winning, until you reach the legend rank. Once you've achieved legend, the system reverts to traditional scoring, with winners earning score after victories, and a reduction of score after losses. Players in the expert rank or lower cannot lose ranks based off rankings at the end of a season. Players can earn legendary gear, Purification Shards, Beguiling Dust, and Gold, which have been increased across ranks. Feature updates, Battlegrounds combat changes. Players now receive 30% less damage, on top of existing damage reduction effects in both Battleground and the Rite of Exile. Thus, time to kill other players should be increased, leading to more sustained symphonies of blades clashing. Our goal was to create more interesting combat scenarios and more enticing duels between players by increasing the damage reduction for players. The reduction of lethality is aimed to make these scenarios more sustained and engaging. We will continue to monitor player behavior and the health of these modes to adjust as needed for optimal playstyles. Based on community feedback, we are changing the values when suffering a defeat at a lower rank when playing in Battlegrounds. Players will lose 0 score at the rank of Bronze after a loss, and significantly less score across all higher ranks.
I'm wondering here what the real impact will be, because 30% damage reduction, in my estimation, will affect players with high resonance much more, but we will see.
Changes to resonance levels during matchmaking. When matchmaking against other players in PvP modes, players will now have to retain the same equipment once the match has been found, and the confirmation screen appears. This fixes an exploit where players were able to change their resonance levels after successful matchmaking to match with players of a much lower resonance. We will continue to monitor this to ensure players of a similar resonance level are matched together. Invisibility updates. We are tweaking the conditions for invisibility across Sanctuary. For those assassins hungry for the earnings from their next mark, if you are invisible, when you deal damage directly to another player, it will now break your invisibility. This change affects any direct damage done, as well as any passive damage from auras or effects that trigger off attacks from the player. Player invisibility will not be affected by any damage over time, or lingering ground damage that existed before the player became invisible. Strike from the shadows, but keep your eye on your surroundings. Adventurer, one never knows what other dangers may be lurking nearby. Challenge Rift levels increased. We are adding 10 new levels to Challenge Rifts, increasing the maximum level to 410 from 400. May your bounties be covetous from this increased threshold for rewards. Changes to Rank 1 clan advantages. When Shadow clans reach Rank 1, the bonus leaps and bounds, which provides 10% increased marks earned by your Dark clan members, will now always be available. The random nature of the advantages offered meant that only some clans would gain this advantage of increased marks, given how valuable it is to clans on competitive servers. We wanted all clans to have the same advantage to chase their immeasurable power and ascend the leaderboards. Class Balance Wizard Skills. Meteor Radius increased to 2.5 from 2. Projectile movement speed increased. Arcane Wind cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Charges increased by 1. Frostfield cooldown reduced to 16 seconds from 20. Effect delay reduced to 1 second from 1.2. Casting range increased. Wizard items. Arcane intensifiers. Disintegrate charges increased by 1. Vision of the Frozen Path. Crown of Arcane Truths. Scorch charges increased by 1. Bisha's Resourceful Countenance. Charges increased by 1. Frostwalkers. Fragments upon fragments. Meteor cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Projectile movement speed increased. Frostwalkers. Meteor radius increased to 2.5 from 2. Robes of the Avalanche. Ray of Frost can now be channeled while moving. Kin's Cryoclasp. Ray of Frost charges increased by 1. Quiet Downpour. Lightning Nova can be cast while moving. Sildra's Fang. Staggernick. Arcane Wind cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Charges increased by 1. Spars of Energy. Teleport cooldown reduced to 15 seconds from 30. Rift Carver. Arcane Torrent can no longer target invisible enemies. Damage reduced by 9%. Rift Carver's Chaotic Orb had the ability to track invisible targets, which felt overly strong and a little unfair. We feel that only visible enemies should be targeted. Barbarian skills. Hammer of the Ancients. Charges increased by 1. Projectile movement speed increased. Leap animation speed increased. You can now leap over walls with improved collision detection. Barbarian items, Visage of the Living Ancients. Yowl of Execration. Demoralize cooldown reduced to 9 seconds from 12. Charges increased by 1. Visage of the Living Ancients. Demoralize range increased to 10 yards from 8. Yowl of Execration. Demoralize range increased to 6 yards from 5. Crusher Rig. Impaler's Breath. Cracklefell. Charred Iron. Temple of Battle. Chain Spear charges increased by 1. Projectile movement speed increased. The Forgotten. Razor Grip. Breaker's Wheel. Peace and Quietus. Charges increased by 1. Razor Grip. Maximum damage increased by 20%. Persistent ground damage effect increased by 20%. Breaker's Wheel. Animation speed increased. Peace and Quietus. Projectile speed increased and movement speed increased when rushing towards your hammer. Animal Instinct. Shocking Chaos. Animation speed increased. You can now leap over walls with improved collision detection. Animal Instinct. Maximum damage increased by 20%. Monk Skills. Wave Strike. Maximum damage increased by 14%. Cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Inner Sanctuary. Cooldown reduced to 20 seconds from 30. Monk items. Roar of the Sea. Well below. Leering Riptide. Wave Strike cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Roar of the Sea. Wave Strike attack animation speed increased. Rattling Arm. Wave Strike cooldown reduced to 12 seconds from 20. Tottering Tower. Flying Kick charge time reduced to 0.5 seconds from 1. Maximum damage increased by 15%. Charges increased by 2. Unbound River. Flying Kick damage to shielded enemies increased to 350% from 250%. Empathy's Blessing. Unsightly Method. Inner Sanctuary cooldown reduced to 20 seconds from 30. Solace of the Peaks. Inner Sanctuary cooldown reduced to 24 seconds from 30. Stirring Titan. Bell of Sorrow. Inner Sanctuary reduced to 14 seconds from 20. Heaven's Bond. Wave of Light spell now affects enemy players by preventing them from entering or exiting the area. Noble's Path. Flying Dragon range increased to 2.5 yards from 2. Attack animation speed increased. Demon Hunter skills. Knife Trap now can be thrown at targeted location. Daring Swing. You can now leap over walls with improved collision detection. Demon Hunter items. 100 Striking Shadows. Multishot now deals increased damage to shielded enemies from 250% to 350%. Antipodal Order. Knockback shot base damage increased by 25%. Burn damage increased by 43%. Movement is less restricted while channeling, allowing for easier turning and rotation. Assassin's Heritage. Spreading Shroud. Concentrated Coldness. Suit Mordant. Smoke Screen projectile speed increased. Assassin's Heritage. Suit Mordant. Concentrated Coldness. Smoke Screen cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Assassin's Heritage. Suit Mordant. Smoke Screen charges increased by 1. Escapable Raptor. Faint Kiff. Legwards of the Inevitable Inferno. Intended Consequences. Clutching Nails. Scrapped Axe. The Potboiler. Knife Trap can now be thrown at a targeted location. Intended Consequences. Knife Trap damage increased by 100%. Clutching Nails. Damage increased by 23%. Immobilized duration increased to 4 seconds from 3. Scrapped Axe. Damage increased by 21%. Movement speed increased briefly after cast. Damage reduction from being hit multiple times is reduced to 50% from 75%. The Potboiler. Enemies struck by multiple knife traps at once no longer take 50% reduced damage from subsequent hits. Darkness's Embrace. Smoke Screen's cooldown reduced to 12 from 20 seconds. Ray cloaking within the smoke has been reduced to 0.5 from 0.5. Crusader skills. Sweep Attack. Damage increased by 8%. Cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Sacred Chain. Cooldown reduced to 10 seconds from 12. Projectile movement speed increased. Crusader items. Long Palm. Closing Jaws. Suspended Rule. Cleanse Sweep. Sweep Attack cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Long Palm. Suspended Rule. Sweep Attack maximum damage increased by 20%. Closing Jaws. Sweep Attack maximum damage increased by 13%. Cleanse Sweep. Sweep attack maximum damage increased by 23%. Spine of the adversary. Public penance. Equal portions. Chambers of exhaustion. The recreant. Sacred chain projectile movement speed increased. Public penance. Chambers of exhaustion. The recreant. Sacred chain cooldown reduced to 10 seconds from 12. Spine of the adversary. Equal portions. Sacred chain cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 12. Chambers of exhaustion. Sacred chain stun duration increased to 4 seconds from 3. The recreant. Delay time for damage and stun to occur is reduced to 1 second from 1.5. Helm of Abrasion. Shield charge damage to shielded enemies increased to 350% from 250%. Proof from on high. Enemy players hit by falling sword can now be chained for up to 2.5 seconds. Air Splitter. Falling sword's maximum damage increased by 20%. Simone's End. Sacred chain's damage increased by 100%. Necromancer skills. Bone Spikes. Charge time reduced to 0.5 seconds from 1. Stun duration increased to 3 seconds from 2. Corpse Lance. Now can be cast while moving. Grim Scythe. Cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Borrowed time. Increased the maximum HP loss per second from 5% to 10% when cast on self. The effect is the same when cast on allies.
I really like the change to the lance here, but above anything else, it looks like we're not going to last after borrowing time unless we defeat the enemy. So best option to counter Necro is just to run away.
Necromancer items. Tremulous Blow. Bone wall damage increased by 50%, can now be cast while moving. Filth Spurn Squalor. Bone wall damage increased by 28%. Duration increased from 6 seconds to 3 seconds. Cage of Chum. Bone wall damage increased by 60%. Corpse generation increased to 2 from 1. Tenthorn. One-armed Devourer. Silvered Wings. Corpse Lance can now be cast while moving. Silvered Wings. Corpse Lance minimum damage increased by 12%, maximum damage increased by 23%. Draft Cryptic. Dark Curse removes all beneficial effects from enemies, up from 1. Strange Sojourn. Wraith form cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9, charges increased by 1. Targeting an enemy is no longer required, attack animation speed increased. Thrash Jaw. Grave Cutter. Grim Scythe cooldown reduced to 6 seconds from 9. Grave Cutter. Grim Scythe attack animation speed increased. Wraithsage Truce. Grim Scythe chill effectiveness increased to 50% from 30%. Gatefeist Helm. Grim Scythe shattered armor duration increased to 6 seconds from 3.
A lot of people are worried about the skill cancel the Necromancer got, and it's definitely another annoying skill. But first of all, you have to remember that the Necromancer usually didn't use this skill in his builds, so this forces us to play even more supportive role than before. I personally enjoy the buff to teleport with fear.
Blood Knight skills. Ravage. First strike damage increased by 10%. Second strike damage increased by 15%. Third strike damage increased by 25%. Annihilation. First and second strike damage increased by 11%. Third and fourth strike damage increased by 38%. Shroud of Night. Effect duration increased from 12 seconds to 8. Abomination. Primary attack speed increased by 20%. Primary attack damage increased by 9%. Cooldown reduced to 15 seconds from 20. Lifesteal is increased by 10%. Abomination. Blood rush damage increased by 25%. Abomination. Shattering Fist first and second attack damage increased by 44%. Third attack damage increased by 64%. Mephitic Cloud. Cooldown reduced to 15 seconds from 20. Shadow's Edge. Shadow's Embrace. Ultimate damage reduced by 6%. Damage reduction for being hit by multiple projectiles is increased from 90% to 80%.
So in the case of the Blood Knight, we get what we could expect. This is a nerf to his primary attack and a buff to Abomination form.
Blood Knight items. Cold Course. Ravage damage increased by 52%. Overrun. Spear Flurry damage increased by 30%. Short dash towards the enemy has been re-added. The Basalver, skewer animation speed increased. Sawtooth, while charging skewer, you are immune to knockback and loss of control. Rootvine Male, tendrils of blood cooldown reduced to 12 seconds from 15. Bats and men both. Swarm of bats projectile speed increased, can now be cast while moving. Momentary comfort. Shroud of Night effect duration increased from 12 seconds to 8. Blood Theriac. Umbral Lance range increased from 10 yards to 8. Animation speed increased. Dash damage increased by 93%. Throw damage increased by 37%. Tooth Drinker. Bardish of Below. Whirling Strike attack animation increased. Tooth Drinker. Whirling Strike damage increased by 13%. Bardish of Below. Whirling Strike damage increased by 18%. Blast's travel range increased to 9 yards from 7 yards.
So much for rebalancing all characters. Decide that returning events, Rising Damnation limited time event, and all clans on deck. As always, thanks for watching.